Timberdoodle, and we are out here at Jefferson County Park in the Wetland. We have our special guest, entomologist Moni Hayne, and we are doing a virtual version of the Insects in the Wetland program. So we've never had to do this before. We're moving into uncharted waters, but Moni is going to teach us and you safely from home how to explore a wetland and how to find insects. So how do you do that, Moni?
Well, one thing about working in a wetland or in the water, you need a different net than you would if you were out in the prairie. And throughout in the prairie, you need a butterfly net or a net that is solid. We actually have, the park has these nets that actually, there are holes in them so that the water can pass through, but the insects can't. So when you go to work in the water, you take your net down into the water and come up with usually a little bit of mud and some plant matter, and you can then look and see who's in here. And that's where we will find all the different insects that we're looking for, as well as the frogs and toads and, well, not toads, but frogs and crawdads and snails, whatever else might be floating around in the water besides the mud. So that's what we're looking for today, is the insects that are living in this really diverse and fun place.
So after we catch them, give us some time to catch them, and in video world that's like no seconds at all. And Moni's going to talk through what some of the different things are that we caught. Even though these aren't insects that we're finding in the wetland, they're still really interesting. In this container over here, we have some different tadpoles. So the two bigger ones are either green frog or bullfrog tadpoles. They will actually overwinter in the pond or wetland just like this. So they will actually, these came out of their eggs last year and stayed through this whole year. And now if you can see just at the base of where the body meets the tail, you can start to see that they're growing their little back legs and they're just newly formed. If you look at the other tadpoles that are in here, obviously they are a smaller size. These are either, I think they might be from a cricket frog or a smaller frog species that we have. So the smaller the frog, the smaller the tadpole. And these were laid as eggs earlier in the year. And so they already have their front legs and back legs as well. Now their tails are still pretty long. Pretty soon that tail will just start absorbing back into the body, and you can kind of see it almost looks like a little reddish right in the gill area. So they are beginning to make the transformation from gills to lungs. So they're making the transformation from breathing the oxygen through the water to breathing the oxygen through the air. So pretty big transition for them. Then tadpoles turn into frogs. And this guy is camera shy and he's just gonna keep turning from us. But this is actually a green frog. Green frogs have this nice line that goes all the way down their back, easily confused with bullfrogs because of the green, similar greenish color that green and bullfrogs have. But green frogs have this line that goes all the way down their back. It's like this raised ridge. Bullfrogs don't have that. It's that kind of line spins around the eye, actually around this circle behind the eye. And so we'll talk about that too. This circle behind the eye is the reason I can say that this is a guy, this is a male frog, because that circle there, part of its ear, that circle there is bigger than the eye. If the circle is bigger than the eye, then it's a male. If the circle is about the same size as the eye, it is a female. So we have a male green frog here. So this is possibly the largest crawdad I've ever caught in my life. So you can just see all the different kind of parts of the body here. So we've got this nice strong tail down here that they can use to propel themselves to swim backwards. We've got its legs and its pinchers here that are trying to figure out what's holding it. Its long antenna here. And then you can somewhat see in the front here, it's kind of feathery mouthpieces. When we put it back in the water, you might be able to see that as well. So this is, so it's like it's posing. So I'm gonna put it back in the water here. Relative to our other crawdads in this container, you can see just how large this one is. So Iowa has 8 different species of crayfish. You can call them crayfish, crawdads, they've got all sorts of names. But we have 8 different species here. It looks like these are like my kids. They're not getting along over in the corner here. And they can lay anywhere between 50 to 450 eggs. The females carry those eggs on the bottom, right below their tail here, and they form like a secretion, like a glue that kind of holds those together and holds it on their underside. Then the eggs will hatch into small crayfish, and after that point, they will hang on to the mother until they are able to first eat their food. After that point, then they will, disperse from the mom and start growing in the wetland. Now we caught all sorts of sizes of crayfish. They're starting to get bigger as we go, but you can see this one over here is quite smaller, and let's see if I can, there, do you see it swimming backwards? They're much more, when they're little like this, they're much more skittish, and then they get bigger and they're a little more feisty. So these are just 4 different crayfish that we caught in the wetland here.
We are looking at water striders. Water striders are actually in the true bug family, meaning they're hemiptera. Water striders walk on water. The way they can walk on water is because they have little hairs on the bottom of their feet. As you look at these, it only looks like they have 4 legs, but actually if you look closer to the head, where the antenna, there you can see the 3rd set of legs, because all insects have 3 pair of legs, 6 legs, and so they hold theirs in front. That way they can catch other tiny little insects to eat. So you see the 3rd pair of legs up by their antenna. So insects have a head, thorax, and an abdomen. The legs are all attached to the thorax area, which is the middle section. Water striders not only walk on water, but they do stay on the top of water. And the water that they are found in is usually small ponds. It would have to be a very slow-moving stream for them to be on. They don't really go that fast. It seems like it if you're going to try to catch one. But water striders just kind of walk around on the top of the water looking for small insects to eat. Okay, this is called a back swimmer. The back swimmers are a true bug, meaning they're in the order Hemiptera. They have hind legs that are oar-like, that have long legs, long hairs on them, that help them to row or to get through the water. But they do swim on their backs. So what you are seeing is their belly. We had a larger one that we caught that turned over, and we saw the backside, the actual backside, and it flew away. It was an adult, and so it had the wings, and so they can fly. The one you're looking at right now is the nymph. A nymph is the youngster. It doesn't have all of its wings, so it can't fly, and it can't fly away from us while we're trying to take pictures of them. They're generally kind of a black and white if you see the back of them. But on the belly, you really don't notice the color differences, but it does swim on its back, so it does the backstroke. They eat small, little, tiny insects in the water. The adults can fly to lights at night and actually end up in swimming pools. These can bite if you would mishandle them. If you try to grab a hold of it, they could bite you. These are damselfly nymphs. Out in the pond, we have dragonflies and damselflies. The dragonflies hold their wings straight out when they're adults, and the adults of the damselflies hold their wings back over their back. So these are the damselflies that we would see around our pond. They're usually much smaller than a dragonfly and more dainty. You think of damsels being a little more dainty than a dragon. So the same with the nymphs. So the nymphs, or these are the babies, if you will. As you look at them, you see they have tails. When they open them up, those are actually the gills. They use those gills to breathe. So when they needed some oxygen, they can get it from the water. They use the gills to get that oxygen to breathe. They have 3 gills that are actually what we might say that's a tail for breathing. These are insects, so they do have 6 legs that you can see. Big eyes. They eat small little insects that are in a pond. The adults are much different colors. These, as nymphs, would be hard to know just which damselfly they're going to turn into until we see the adults. What we're looking at now are water boatmen. Water boatmen use those hind legs that have fine little hairs on them like oars. See how he's rowing around? The large one is the adult. It's dark colored. It has full wings, so it could fly, and it could fly to lights at night if it wanted to. Prefers to stay around the pond where it's going to be eating small insects. The other one that's in the container is what we call the nymph, or it's the baby. So it has not gotten full wings yet. They molt several times before they turn into an adult and have full wings. So these are the small ones. They eat algae, mosquito larvae, any other small little things that they can find. These actually swim on their stomach like you were doing a regular swimming stroke. We had talked before about the back swimmers that swim on their backs. These actually just swim on their tummy. So again, these are called the water boatmen, and they are common in our ponds. So what we're looking at now are water scavenger beetles. There's many different species of water scavenger beetles in Iowa. These are the small ones. We do have water scavenger beetles that get to be over an inch long. Water scavenger beetles eat insects in the water. They are found in our ponds. The adults also will eat some plant matter, some of the dead plant matter that's decaying in a pond. So this is a beetle. It has a hard shell. It looks a lot like the predaceous diving beetles. The best way to tell the difference between the water scavengers is they have very short antennae. If these would hold still long enough that you can see their head, their antennas are small, club-like little antennae. Then if we switch over and look at the predaceous diving beetle. And you could see its hind legs, how well it's got the hairs on it that look like oars. And while it's sitting still, at times, maybe you can see the long antenna. The longer antenna tell you that this is a predaceous diving beetle, not a water scavenger beetle. Also, as you look at the predaceous diving beetle, if it's at the right angle, you can see how its butt is up in the air? It's getting some oxygen. And now if you look while it's underwater, you can see the little bubble on its butt where it's got the oxygen that it uses to breathe. So that's how it goes deep diving or swimming underwater. See, he's got his tail up, he's getting some oxygen, and he holds that on his tail end until he absorbs that for breathing, and then he can go diving down to look for food, look for dinner, and then he puts his tail back up to get some oxygen and gets a little bubble. There he is, he's getting a little bubble so he can breathe while he's down swimming. And the predaceous diving beetles, the large ones, are known for even eating tadpoles. This little one will not eat a big tadpole. It might eat a very small tadpole when it's first emerged from the eggs. But with the long antenna, this tells you that it's a predaceous diving beetle. They're also, the larvae are sometimes called water tigers. They're very long looking, little worm-like looking. But right now we have the predaceous diving beetle, the beetle or the adult.
So here we have a leech. And when people hear leech, the first thing they think of is a bloodsucker. And that's true. Most leeches are external parasites, meaning they like to stay on the outside of the body, and they're a parasite. They're using whatever has blood as their host. Not all leeches are parasites though. Some are scavengers. The kind of cool thing about this one right now is this is the inchworm method of getting around. You can see that it's kind of inching along and pulling itself. They can also swim. There's not a ton of water in this little container, and so that's kind of why it's choosing to do the inchworm method there. Let's see if I can get him to go again. Oop, and he rolled up. So leeches, when they find a host that they like, they'll make a small cut, and then their mouthpiece will actually secrete kind of an anticoagulant to stop the blood from clotting, and then that will allow it to feast on the blood. And they work pretty quickly, and they also do it without harming the host. That way the host doesn't know that they're there. And then after they get their fill of blood, they might not eat again for another month or two. So once they find a host that they like, they get the blood and then they move on. So this is a leech that we caught here in the wetland.
So now we're looking at a dragonfly nymph. The dragonfly nymph is the baby dragonfly. They live, the nymphs are in the water, so we find them here in the ponds around Jefferson County. And then when the nymphs get mature, they climb onto a piece of grass or cattail, and then they shed their skin and emerge as the adult dragonflies that we see buzzing around the ponds in Jefferson County. The dragonfly nymphs have a much more of a squat, stout body than the damselflies that we were looking at before. The damselflies are very long and slender and have the three long tails that are the gills, whereas the dragonflies are very squat, and they do not have gills out the back that are like tails. They just have a little short butt, if you will, And what they do for their oxygen is that they actually suck in water through their bottom or through the rectum. They suck in the water, get the oxygen out of it for the breathing, and then one way that they move is that they spurt that water that they had taken in out their butt, and it pushes them along, and that's how they move. So they can get around and go places. That's one way of doing it, is not only do they get their oxygen by taking in the water through their butt, but they also spurt it out through their tail end. They have a mouth part that's much different than damselflies. They actually have a spoon, if you will, around their mouth. It's almost more like a soup spoon because it kind of covers their mouth area. And then when they see a little insect or something that they're trying to eat, they take this arm out. It's almost like an elbowed arm out, and they reach that arm out, grab whatever it is, and then bring it back into their mouth so they can eat it, and then chomp, 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 chomp. So they reach that elbowed arm, and it grabs a hold of whatever the food is, brings it back to their mouth, and then they can eat it. So their mouth parts kind of have this spoon, elbow-like appendage for eating, which is different than the damselfly nymphs, which just kind of collect them with their legs and their mouth parts to eat. So the dragonfly nymphs are much more squat, kind of squared off looking than the very long damselfly nymphs are.
So one of the really important things to do when you're done catching all your creatures in the water is to make sure that everything you took out of the water goes back in. Even that junk that you think, oh, it's just moss, it's just grass, it doesn't need to go back in. There's stuff that we can't see with our eyes that's living and growing on that, and it needs to go back into the water. So Moni is making sure the nets are clean, and she's emptying out the water back into the wetland so everything can survive and we can catch it again later.
Make sure that when you're cleaning your net out that you clean it in one direction and then turn it wrong side out, clean the other direction so that the nets are all nice and clean. Then they're ready for the next time that you want to go out.
So this is an area here at Jefferson County Park that you can come out and explore. You can get a net from Chickadee in town. They sell water nets, or Walmart, or two of the places that I know have nets in town. Go grab a net, come out here to the wetland, make sure you're socially distanced, but this is an awesome activity to do this summer.